Byzantium, how does it work? Who knows? Today we're going to try and find out. As you can see, I've done quite a few attempts at a Byzantium run, and I think I have a pretty good strategy. In fact, I'm so confident this is actually going to be an Iron Man run. Alright, so first of all, let's go over the problems Byzantium currently finds itself with, because there's quite a few of them. Let me illustrate the first one. If we look at Constantinople, we'll see that this province is currently making 34 ducats. And how much of that is going into our treasury? 1.7 of those ducats are actually getting into our treasury. How horrible. The first problem Byzantium finds itself with is none of the estates are really paying any tax, or can even pay tax. The nobles can pay 0.5, the clergy can pay none, the burghers can pay none. Only the peasantry can really pay anything resembling a acceptable tax rate at 22%. And this is all due to 4 privileges. If we switch over to the estate screen, we can see each of the estates has a corruption privilege, which not only reduces their maximum tax, but also gives some pretty horrible modifiers, like the nobility one here, which gives minus 20% morale as well as the minus 20% tax rate. The clergy have one, of course. The burghers have one, which also decreases our trade efficiency. Even the peasants have one. Luckily, we can basically counteract that by them having not much influence. This one also reduces our manpower. So our first order of business, our first real goal, is to start getting rid of these privileges. They don't provide any benefit. They don't even increase the estate's satisfaction, so we want them gone. Unfortunately, in order to remove them, we need to get our legitimacy up to 95%. So that's going to be our main goal. Getting our legitimacy high, as well as getting our stability high, so we can afford the cost of actually removing these privileges. The second big problem Byzantium finds itself with is disasters. Right now, at the start of the game, there are multiple disasters that can trigger. They don't show up right now, but once we tick for a month, they will. And honestly, it's kind of random which disaster can trigger. You could play and have none of them trigger, or they could trigger within the first month. So we're not really going to be able to strategize much. We're simply going to roll with the punches as they come. One disaster is better than the other. Personally, I think the coup disaster is actually really helpful. But let's establish what our initial moves are going to be. Since none of our provinces or locations really pay us any tax, we kind of want to reduce our tax base, as tax base affects how much we're going to pay when we increase our legitimacy and increase our stability, because both of these costs are tied to tax base and income base. So we're going to max our cost of the court and our stability costs to start with. This puts us in pretty bad territory expenses wise. Now we're going to release large portions of our country as vassals. To start with, we're going to release the historical Duchy of Thessaly. We are then going to release Central Macedonia as a fiefdom. I'm going to release all these vassals as fiefdoms because I just think fiefdom. We're also going to release a vassal in southern Greece who we're likely going to hand over all of the territory in the area to. Now we're going to sell some provinces. We're going to sell this little province here in Albania to Serbia for a hefty 289 gold. Wow, now we have money. We're then going to sell this little province here in Epirus to our vassal of Epirus. I'm sure they'll appreciate it, for another 48 gold. Now we have this small province here in Asia Minor, the city of Philadelphia. It's not really going to help us much because it's so cut off from the mainland, so we're actually just going to sell it to one of the Turkish tribes here. We'll sell it to whoever will pay the most for it, netting us another 130 gold. I'm now going to cede some of the provinces in Macedonia to our vassal here. We're even going to cede these island provinces because unfortunately they're not very helpful to us. We're then going to cede all of our Greek provinces. There, we have released most of our country now. The only provinces that are left to us are these ones in the Balkans, as it were, and these small little provinces in Anatolia. Personally, I think that releasing these two locations as vassals is quite viable. We're not going to though, because I think it's better to keep a hold of them, as they are of course cores, and they're in territories provinces that themselves are our cores. So once we take them from the Ottomans, we'll immediately call them. Speaking of Ottomans, we are going to be destroying them. We could CB them right now, but personally I prefer not to, because the goal is to actually have a functioning country, not destroying the Ottomans. Destroying the Ottomans is a long-term goal. So for now, we're going to build a spy network. with the goal of crushing them a little later on. We're going to put our navy out to sea just outside Constantinople to increase our trade presence in the area, our maritime presence in the area. We're actually going to demolish one of our forts up here because we don't really need it. We're going to keep our fort here in Callipolis, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, and in Constantinopolis itself. This fort in Constantinopolis is going to do a lot of heavy lifting, as you'll see. For research, we're only going to be able to grab 3 different researches before we get to the next, before the Renaissance triggers. Personally, we're not going to go too crazy. We're just going to go down to the peasant connections, and then we'll transition over to the age of the Renaissance and start researching there. When it comes to culture, we're going to accept Burgundian. Horrible, I know, but it's going to provide us a little benefit. Not much. You could actually just avoid tolerating them if you didn't want to. For rivals, we can't really set the people we want to set as rivals as our rivals because we're so much stronger than them, so we're just going to throw some random rivals around. We're actually going to ban exports because we kind of are going to be relying on income from minting in the short term. Unfortunately, our heir is an idiot, but he is likely going to be the one that succeeds the throne unless certain things happen. We're going to set him to an administrative education, just hope for the best. There's a very good chance the moment I unpause the game, our ruler dies because he has this sickly character modifier which reduces his life expectancy by 25 years, and then we'll be in a regency for most of this video. Now, for our cabinet positions, these are kind of important. To start with, we're going to have one of them increase stability. We're going to have one of them increase support for the government. The last 2, I'm going to save one for a few months into the game. For the other, there's not really anything that really helps much with our current predicament. We could increase control somewhere with the increased control one, but as we've established, we don't get any money from tax, so increasing control doesn't actually help much. At the very least, it could increase the amount of levies we get in a province, which I guess is nice. So instead of we're going to put control down in a province with a lot of people in. We're not going to put it down in Byzantium because it's a waste really, because Constantinople's already at 100% control. Instead, we're going to throw it down into Koselia, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. And as I said, we'll just keep our final cabinet position for a little bit. Now, are we going to appoint somebody to the cabinet? This is kind of a hard one, I think. We don't really want to appoint anybody who isn't a part of our crown estate, but we don't really have many people who are a part of our crown estate to put. We have this guy, but in my experience, he dies not long after starting the game. This character is much more reliable. He seems to survive a little longer. So we are going to appoint him. We're going to appoint him to the legitimacy goal, even though he doesn't really increase it much. Now we have a choice. We could promote him to the head of the cabinet, which will give us the crown head of cabinet modifier, which will increase our crown power by 25%. I'm not going to be doing this. Why? Because it does give a monthly legitimacy effect of 0.02, but it costs 5 legitimacy to do it. And as I said before, getting our legitimacy up as high as possible is our main goal. So setting ourselves back by 5 legitimacy isn't really going to help us. And sure, crown power is nice, but we can't really make use of it in this early stage because nobody pays any tax. It's something we'll need to increase later on as much as possible, but for now, it doesn't really help us, unfortunately. Crown power is just not that useful right now. As I said, things could go very differently the moment I unpause the game, depending on what random event triggers. Whether our ruler just dies, whether a disaster happens, but we'll see, right? Let's begin. So we have our first negative event, an unskippable one, the Turkish threat. They have to be stopped, which reduces our stability by 20%. Now our 2 disasters have popped up. We have the coup attempt and the Eastern Roman succession crisis. Both of these have some pretty negative effects. The worst one of the 2 is the Eastern Roman succession crisis. We'd like to avoid that one if possible, but we can't really. In order to avoid it, we'll need to get our legitimacy up to 80%, or our stability up to 50%, which, to be honest, isn't going to happen. If we're lucky, the coup attempt will actually trigger. The coup attempt is pretty easy to deal with, mainly because it just ends after 5 years, and it has lots of events which increase legitimacy, which is what we want, right? And because it just ends on its own without us having to do anything, it will basically just be 5 years of free legitimacy. and stability. But as I said, it's kind of random. Each of these have a chance to appear every month. We can't really guarantee which one will appear. We can't really control which one will appear. None of them might appear. All we can do is really wait, which is what we're now going to do. We have another event here, the decline of the Pelagius Renaissance. We could just spend 10 prestige, or we could spend 33 ducats for 10 prestige. Personally, prestige doesn't really help us here with anything, so we're just going to say goodbye to prestige. And there we go. It's only September, but our ruler has died. We are now in a regency. Funnily enough, being in a regency does increase our stability for some reason, but reduces our counter-espionage. Our ruler is now our previous ruler's wife, and she'll be regent until our son is of age, which might actually not happen in this video, because we might just solve all our problems before then. We will now continue waiting. Here is another unavoidable event, the earthquake in Constantinopolis. So this event has two choices. We can spend 1,000 gold and decrease the prosperity in Constantinople by 10%, or we can spend 10 legitimacy, 10 religious influence, and reduce prosperity by 20%. I know what I said about desperately trying to increase our legitimacy, but I don't think losing 10 legitimacy in exchange for 1,000 gold is a good trade, really. So we are going to take the alas, there's nothing we can do about it choice, which sets us back 10 legitimacy, but oh well. Better than going bankrupt repeatedly and spending all of our gold. We're now going to use that cabinet action I'd mentioned previously that we didn't use to recover in Byzantium. We want the prosperity to get back up to where it was, or at least to not be in the negative. You may have seen some recent discourse about how trade income actually increases expenses, and I'm going to show it off here a little actually. So we can see our balance is currently 24%, 24 gold. We're going to stop all of the trades that we're currently doing. You'll see our balance goes down to 30 because we're no longer making any money from trade. If we wait a full month though, it'll tick. And our costs have fallen down to 24 gold, almost as if trade income doesn't really do anything for us. Now, we've reached the point where the money we stockpiled is starting to run out, so we're going to start increasing our minting. We're actually going to go into the negatives where inflation is going to increase, but that's really a short-term problem. It's better to let our inflation increase than to go deeper and deeper into debt. Once we get our legitimacy up, we can actually start cutting back on costs in a big way. And then at that point, we will be able to start reducing our minting expenses. We've actually increased our stability to the point where the coup disaster is now no longer going to trigger, which actually isn't what I wanted. I wanted the coup disaster to trigger. I hope the Eastern Roman succession doesn't happen. We've got our first parliamentary option, and we're likely going to bolster the government, if only because while bolster the government is active, we will gain 1 stability a month. Which isn't crazy, but we need that stability as fast as possible. And if we actually manage to pass bolster the government, it will reduce the cost of revoking privileges and give crown power, which also helps reducing the cost of revoking privileges. We could request additional taxes from the estates, which will counteract the effect of the negative privileges that reduce their maximum tax by 25%. Which would be a little boon for our economy, but boosting our economy right now isn't that important as opposed to getting up the legitimacy. After all, if we can increase our legitimacy, it won't really matter what the fact that we're losing 25% income, because we'll have solved that by revoking those privileges. It's better to long term focus on getting our legitimacy up. Of course, if we fail passing this law, then I will be wrong, and it would have been better to raise additional taxes. Here's another event, reform of the universal judges of Romans. This one costs 23 gold, and we are going to do it. Why? Because it removes this government reform, which increases a cabinet seat by 1 and increases estate power from cabinet positions, and it replaces it with this one, which reduces the estate power from privileges by 20% down to 10%, but it gives us a flat 10% crown power, which makes it a definite bonus that we want. It also increases our ruler's admin ability by 10. which in reality kind of does nothing because our ruler doesn't count as a ruler because they're a region for some reason. But either way, we successfully managed to pass our parliamentary issue. So we're going to be gaining 20% crown power for the next 10 years, plus a 10% reduction to revoking things cost. We've actually gone past 50% legitimacy. We're almost there. This ticking up legitimacy will also increase our crown power. And here we have a bad event, the rise of Alexis Apoculus. This just gives us minus 10 legitimacy straight up, plus minus 7 stability. How horrible. But we just gotta roll with the punches, right? Our spy network in the Ottomans has successfully reached 20%, so we are now going to fabricate a casus belli on them. We're going to go for a claim on the province casus belli, and we're going to pick the most populated province they own, which is Bursa, which is currently called Vendigar, because that is the most valuable province the Ottomans own and their capital, which is so it is the province we want to take from them. The moment that casus belli is done, we're going to attack the Ottomans. So here's a good event I was kind of hoping for. Byzantium starts with 2 loans in effect, but by this event just lets us cancel our loans in exchange for 0.11 diplomatic power. Oh boy, I love essentially getting free money. Ah, here we go. We were close. We managed to get to 59 legitimacy, but the bid for the Eastern Roman crown has triggered. Bring me his head in a spike. This guy is now trying to take our throne. We will lose 20% stability, and we'll enter this disaster proper. So the problem with this disaster is there's not much we can actually do to end it. We kind of just gotta wait for the rebels to rebel and then crush them. Or if we're lucky, the guy leading the rebellion will just die, and then the rebellion will end instantly. We can do some of these things here, requesting support from various stratas in the country, but none of them really give us much benefit in exchange for the cost, as it usually just gives them more privileges, and really it delays the rebellion, and we kind of want the rebellion to happen as fast as possible so it can just be over. Being in this disaster is really horrible. It decreases the state satisfaction by 25% and decreases crown power by 20%. It does give us a monthly legitimacy though, but I mean, we don't really want to have lower state satisfaction, because then they'll also want to rebel. And by decreasing our crown power, it decreases further the state satisfaction, as we'll see, once our crown power is currently sitting at 31, and then once a month ticks, it falls down to 28. Ah, here's an event. Foreign merchant privileges. So we can sign an agreement with Venice, with Genoa, or with both of them. Doing this gives us a reliance on Italian vessels modifier, which reduces the cost of galleys and decreases the cost of legitimacy, which we really don't want. Out of everything we want legitimacy. So if we say no, these leeches are up to no good, which they are, they're Italian after all, we'll gain an extra monthly legitimacy, that's what we want, right? Here's one of the few good events we can get from this disaster, testing one's metal, which gives us a new character, but more importantly, we can just get 5 stability and 5 legitimacy and 2.5 stability just from recruiting him. And really, that's what we want. We're not going to give him a position in government because we're lazy and we don't want to spend the money on it. And he's currently in the peasants' estate, so it won't benefit our country. But we'll do it anyway. Then we have another event where the proposal of the nobles, well, that we give them the noble navy privilege in exchange for stability, or we just say no, which gives us stability. So we're going to say no. Now we have another event. The nobles demand compensation. We can give them 24 gold in exchange for 2.5 stability, or we can say they're out of line, which really upsets them. But I mean, they're already ticking down to being pretty upset. But will give us 10 legitimacy. This is kind of a hard choice, really, because it'll put us over the 90 legitimacy. We'll almost be at 100, but they might rebel. We're going to do it just because why not? If they rebel, they rebel. Now we have an event related to the Rise of the Turks situation, where they'll just make demands of us, and we can just say no. which gives us legitimacy. So we're going to say no. And we've managed to do it. Our legitimacy has hit 100. Everybody celebrate. We're now actually making some money because we're no longer spending as much on the court, and we can actually revoke some of these privileges. Problem is, of course, revoking them is going to be very expensive. And because of the disaster we're in, they're not going to give us much. Their satisfaction is going to be so low that they're not going to give us much tax anyway. So before we do anything, we're going to try and increase our crown power a little. We could make this guy, who we appointed to our cabinet, we could now make him the head of the cabinet. That will, of course, cost us. And we can't do it anyway because it costs so much money. Oh, due to inflation, of course. So we could take a loan, essentially, to do this. It'll decrease legitimacy by 5%, but it will increase crown power by 25%. And we'll just regain that legitimacy over time, right? So we're actually going to do it. We're going to take a loan. Scary, I know. And then we're going to appoint him. We're not going to immediately start revoking things, because we're going to wait for our legitimacy to tick back up before we start revoking privileges. We also want to wait for this reform to come into effect, which is going to happen any second now. There we go. And with that, the Renaissance triggers. We're not really going to think that hard about which research we take first, because we're simply going to take the one at the top, that being scholarly treaties. This one's pretty good because it reduces the cost of revoking privileges, which is definitely going to help. Now on to which of these focuses we're going to take. It's kind of a hard choice because each of them is kind of good. It's not really going to matter for us though in the short term, because we're not going to be able to research these benefits for quite a while. Personally, I think admin's quite good, if only because we can get the stability investment for an extra 2, as well as proximity cost minus 2.5, which is going to help a lot in the long term. Then for the diplomacy branch, we can get the tributary system, which increases income by 2.5, which isn't that good. But more importantly, we can get minus 5 costs for war costs, which is pretty good. In the military branch, we can gain access to the enforced service advance, which gives us a 10% to our levy size. If you really wanted to have just a bigger levy army, this would be beneficial. For me, though, we're going to go with the admin focus. As I said, we're not really going to be able to research anything because it's going to be a while before we get access down the tree to those researches. For now, we're just going to focus on getting the scholarly treaties. Alright, so we're at 32 crown power. We're going to revoke something. We're at 0 stability, so it's not going to completely destroy our nation. There's really a choice between two here. We could revoke the peasants one for a simple 10 stability, or we could revoke the burghers one for 26 stability. Personally, I'm going to go with the burghers one. Why? Because our satisfaction with the burghers is actually pretty high, at 66%. So they'll actually pay us a lot of tax. Whereas if we look at the peasants, their satisfaction is currently trending to just 50% due to this disaster. So it's not going to lead to a big tax increase unless we upset them by going over the limit. So let's revoke this. It's going to set us back by 23 stability, which is in itself going to reduce the estate satisfaction equilibrium, but what are you going to do? There. We've revoked the first of these negative privileges. The burghers are now actually paying tax. And as we increase our stability, the amount of tax they pay is simply going to tick up. In fact, we're making quite a bit of money through our income now. We could afford to drop down the minting costs a little to reduce that stability income. But more importantly, our casus belli on the Ottomans is now here. Now for the more precarious part of this video, we are going to attack the Ottomans. Attacking the Ottomans can be fairly different depending on the situation. In this run, the Ottomans have no allies or vassals, which makes them a little easier to deal with, but doesn't change much. I've defeated the Ottomans when they vassalized nearly the entirety of northern Anatolia here. So we're just going to do it. We're going to call in Trebizond, not that they're going to provide us much help, but it's always nice to have a friend. The Ottomans themselves are actually going to have their own friend, in the form of these Iumids, Ids, but that shouldn't be a big problem. We're going to declare war. We're going to raise our navy and our military. We're going to gather our navy in the strait. We're going to gather our army a little bit to the left, of Constantinople. We are going to put a noble in charge, even though we hate nobles. We're actually going to put a high admin leader in charge. You might be like, why? That won't make us better at fighting. It's like, yeah, we're not going to fight. We're going to put that guy in charge, and we're going to sit here. The Ottoman are just going to siege down our holdings that they have access to on the other side of the strait. But that's what we want them to do, funnily enough. Now the Ottomans are going to head to Constantinople and begin sieging it. And with that, the trap is sprung. We are now going to sail our army around, and we are now behind the Ottomans. Between them and their land. Once we de-siege this province here, we'll be able to see that in effect. There, we have done it. So now the Ottomans are actually cut off from their food supply. They are trapped outside the gates of Constantinople. They can either abandon the siege and go across the strait to attack us, or they can simply stay there and starve to death. Both of these things are what we want. We're actually going to split off a very small segment of our army, only around 500 men, and we're going to use these guys to start sieging this province down here. Now we're going to switch our current leader of the army. We're going to switch our main army to an actual high military leader, and we're going to switch the other one to a high admin leader. The admin increases the effect how fast you siege down provinces. Well, of course, military affects how good you are at fighting. And since we want to siege down this province, it's better to have a high admin leader. Since these guys here are currently in the war, they might show up and just stack wipe our sieging army. So that's something we'll need to keep an eye on. For now though, we're just going to wait. The Ottomans are going to starve to death fairly quickly with their supply lines cut off. And we're just going to sit here and on the other side of the strait and watch them die. There, it took 300 days, but we successfully taken Izmit. The Ottomans have made no progress in their siege on Constantinople. They have lost nearly their entire army sieging it. Now we're going to move our small little army deeper into the Ottomans and start sieging their capital. Remember, we do have our vassals, and they're sitting over here with their large army. They may eventually come over and help. We've researched our next advance. For our next advance, really we have a choice. We can go down this branch, mainly for the loyalty of subjects bonus, as well as for the extra loyalty equilibrium for the nobility, and then the proximity cost modifier there. If we really wanted to, we could also go down this branch for an increase to morale, and then for better, higher quality levies. For us, though, we're actually going to go down this branch. Why? Because we're kind of just going to rush all the way down to stability cost investment. It's going to take a while to get there, but getting just free stability is nice. And the other bonuses don't really help us much in our current predicament. Our vassals are on the move. This might be time for us to completely annihilate the Ottoman army. So as you can see, the Ottoman's army has fallen down to only 3,000 men. If our vassals come over and attack them, we will join the fight with our not very good army. Looks like our vassals are just going to sit next. No, they're going for the kill. We're going to support them then. Despite the quality of the Ottoman troops, they can't stand up to 14,000 Greeks. And there we go. Not only did we defeat them, we stack wiped them. The Ottoman army is now gone because they could not retreat due to our navy blocking the strait. There, that was easy. Now we're now going to enter the country and just start sieging down everything. It's actually better that we do this faster because the Ottomans will try to re-raise their army. Luckily though, the Ottomans army they're not going to be able to raise the army they had. They've also lost any of their actual good soldiers when the army was stack wiped. About time for us to pass another parliamentary issue. Unfortunately, we don't have anything good here, really. In fact, we have very few privileges. And there we go. We have full occupied the Ottomans. Now to bully them. We are going to fully annex the Ottomans, which is one of the reasons why I held out instead of declaring war on them immediately at the start of the game. We're then going to take as much money as we can from them because we like money. And there we go. The Ottomans are now gone. They no longer exist. We won. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Also, it upset everyone in the area, but we don't really care about how upset these various Turks are. We'll start improving relationships with them just because, you know, it's nice to. Just to avoid any bad things happening. Now, what to do with this land? As we know, we don't gain any tax from controlling land because of our states making everything difficult. We do get some tax now, thanks to the revoking one of the privileges for the burghers, but unfortunately because of our current disaster, everyone's unhappy. So again, unless we make them even more unhappy, we're not going to gain much tax. So with this territory, we're actually just going to, you know, liberate it as vassals. We're going to look for provinces that we don't currently core, that we don't have as cores as default, and then we're just going to release it. We could release the Ottomans themselves, but we're not going to do that. We don't want to return them to the field, as it were. We're going to release Ankara. We have to release it as a vassal because it is a wrong religion territory and therefore cannot be made into a fiefdom. There, we've released lots of small little states in Anatolia. You might ask why we're releasing such small states. Well, the idea is they're small now, but they will take the provinces that they're in and give them to them so that they can fully make use of the province where we can't. As you saw, our small little vassals over here were able to provide a lot of support in our war with the Turks, and we're going to use these guys kind of in the same way. We're going to take, as we take more and more territory from various Turks, we'll hand it over to small little vassals, who will then integrate at a later date, once we actually get our various economy back on track. Now though, the only provinces we're going to keep are the ones that we actually start with cores in, mainly the ones along the Anatolian coast, because these provinces are going to be quite profitable. If we actually take a look at proximity, we can see that we have very high maritime presence in the Sea of Marmon, which makes cities like Neklamidia, or Izmit as it was called, prime locations for getting really high proximity in. Look at it, it's almost 100% proximity. If we can increase our maritime presence in the sea, as well as increase the harbour capacity here, it's not even that outlandish that we'll be able to achieve 100% proximity in this city. And then provinces in the area, as we go further inland, will start to connect to this city. It will become a pseudo second capital on the mainland that the territories will connect to. Of course, right now, it's not going to do much, mainly because we've just taken this territory and control is all pretty low. The only problem we really find ourselves with currently is this disaster. The moment this disaster ends, we're not going to have any problems left. We've successfully defeated the Ottomans and destroyed them. Our economy is doing a lot better, though that's mainly due to inflation. Once we drop inflation down, once we drop minting down, as you can see, our economy kind of collapses. Again, that's all just due to the disaster, though. The moment we can get rid of the disaster, we'll be able to start making money from our states actually paying tax. Unfortunately, removing this disaster is easier said than done. We basically just need to wait for them to rebel, as discussed previously. We unfortunately can't force them to rebel, it's really just a waiting game. The only other way that we could solve it is if the leader of it just died, but that's not something we can really affect. The Black Death has spawned, and is now going to ravage everybody. But we've already solved most of our problems. Maybe even the Black Death will kill that guy who leads the rebellion, wouldn't that be nice? We've managed to get our stability up to the point where we could essentially end the war if there were no active rebels. But again, we're still just waiting. It's going to take around 15 months for them to rebel, and when they do, we will just annihilate them, and then the disaster will be over and everything will be fixed. The enemy has revolted, but at the same time, the disaster ended, which isn't what's supposed to happen, but it doesn't matter. We're just going to annihilate the rebels. The regency is over. Our absolute idiot of a ruler has successfully taken the throne, which isn't great, but it could be worse. At least we're no longer in a regency. We're going to start tolerating Turkish culture, which will give our economy a little boost, and since we're going to be controlling a lot of Turks, it's better to have them on our side than not. There, the rebellion's over. We have quite a lot of stability. We could revoke one of the privileges. It might even be tempting to revoke the noble one. It's going to put us back by about 50 stability though, which will decrease the equilibrium of the estates, but our equilibrium is currently quite high. It might be worth it. It might be worth it. Either that or we revoke the clergy's one for 30. That would basically put us on 0 stability, which wouldn't be too bad at all. Or we could revoke the peasant one, but the peasant ones are already paying us about the max they'd be happy to. It could be beneficial though. We're going to revoke the noble one just to show the effects on our economy for you, the viewer. Even though personally, I think I'd leave this one for later and just I'd try and up the costs of revoking, down the costs of revoking more and more. I'd also try and increase crown power further, just for that sweet revoke privilege cost. But let's do it. It's going to cost us 90 stability, plus a minus 25% to the estate satisfaction. That puts us on minus 61 stability, which decreases state satisfaction by 18%. How horrible. But if we wait a tick, you can see that we can now actually tax our nobility. They're currently not going to pay us anything because of how unhappy they are. But once the happiness ticks over 25%, we'll actually get some money from them. And then our ruler died at the age of 16. Wow, and we're back in a regency, but this might be good because now we're a regent for our 12-year-old son who's actually good. Wow. Thank you, Black Plague, if you were the one that killed him. I never thought I'd be thanking the Black Plague, but here we are. And look, the nobility are actually starting to pay tax. How beautiful. Everything's working out just as it should. So I think we're going to call the video here. At this point, if you've followed this strategy, the world is kind of your oyster. The Ottomans are gone. Our economy, while not incredibly robust, has improved considerably. And once our stability increases up from its very low point of minus 56, we'll actually start getting quite a lot of tax, as we are now taxing 3 of our states in the form of the clergy, in the form of the nobles, the burghers, and the peasants. We've also removed the noble privilege that was making our armies utter trash. So that's pretty good. The only 2 privileges left due to corruption that we need to revoke is the clergy's one and the peasants' one, which honestly shouldn't be too hard. The peasants' one is very cheap to revoke, and the clergy isn't that much expensive. We can also start thinking about revoking other privileges that the nobles have to further decrease their power and increase the power of our monarchy. As I said, the world kind of feels like our oyster. We could expand into Bulgaria, we could expand more into Anatolia, we could retake the provinces in southern Greece that have been taken by Naples and other Italians. When it comes to control, Byzantium is actually a very good naval capital due to having 100% harbour capacity, which we can further increase as the ages go by and we build more buildings, which means we can kind of make this sea into a basin of control where proximity will travel from Constantinople to our outlying provinces. If we increase proximity up here to 100%, we'll be able to get nearly 100% control in a lot of these coastal cities, which can then spill control further into the mainland, which makes this a very nice kind of basin for control. So that would be my game plan going forward. Once we get docks, once we get the banking from the Renaissance, I would probably rush down to docks, and then from there to light ships, or barcos, which I'm almost definitely pronouncing wrong. And I would begin increasing proximity in the sea. How many seas is it? Let's check. 1, 2. Only 2 seas, 3 if we want to get to southern Greece. But once we increase proximity in these seas, we'll be able to get very high control in the provinces along the coast. That'll be the point where I start trying to integrate these vassals, like Central Macedonia, Thessaly, Epirus, and Arcadia. I think I would leave vassals in Anatolia longer, mainly because we're going to use them for a lot of the fighting. We're going to be conquering Turkish land, releasing it as vassals, having them fight the other Turks for us, and then once we've moved them further inland, we'll start to integrate them, kind of on a rolling basis, depending on how high we can get control and other factors. We do need to be aware that the rise of the Turks situation is still ongoing. and will be ongoing till the 1400s. In order to end it prematurely, we'd need to essentially annihilate all of these Turkic tribes, which isn't that outlandish. It would just have to see if it's possible. It doesn't really matter, since the disaster will end on its own, but do be aware that whoever the strongest of these tribes is has lots of events that are beneficial to them. Events that lets them just subjugate other countries, or just expand quite quickly. One of the ways Ottomans can be quite tough to defeat is that they've just vassalized loads of other countries in the area for free. But the strategy I use to defeat them, I've been able to use to defeat them every single time I fought them, even when they've had loads of vassals. We simply allow the Ottomans to enter Constantinople, we sneak up behind them, we cut them off. Our vassals will eventually come over and stack wipe them for us, and which we can support with, and then we just blanket siege the country. If you want to declare war on the Ottomans, the moment the game starts with a no CB war, you can. You won't be able to full annex them like I did, though, so do keep that in mind. But you can essentially take their most valuable provinces and leave them just a shell, a husk. If you take enough of their land, they'll actually drop from being the first-ranked Turkic tribe, which essentially makes them completely irrelevant, as they'll no longer receive the buffs and events from it. Alright, this has been more of a kind of rambly video because I've been trying to show what to do on the fly, but I think it went okay. I hope this was useful for you and your potential Byzantium run. If you have any further questions about Byzantium or anything else, don't hesitate to ask. As I said, I've done this at least 10 times now, and every time I've had success, but it's just degrees of success because of how random things are. I definitely think getting the coup disaster, which essentially lets you hide from the succession crisis disaster, is a lot better. If you could avoid this succession crisis entirely, that would be perfect, just because it's such a horrible disaster. But on the flip side, if you do avoid it, it'll essentially stay forever, with it potentially triggering 100% years in the future if you don't keep your stability and legitimacy in check. So maybe it's better to just trigger it now, get it out of the way, and then not have to worry. There is a third disaster that can trigger, but it's very unlikely to trigger, so we're not really going to talk about it if you play this way. Just keep in mind that keeping your stability, your legitimacy, and more importantly for that disaster, your overall control above a certain level is important. For now though, this is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Is there another nation that you'd like to see a strategy guide for? I'm sure I can make a better one for a nation that isn't so random. Either way, thank you for watching and see you next time.